Weirdest foods throughout history. Subscribe. Peanut butter stuffed, oh my god, what? Alright, it's the 20th century. The world's still picking itself up from the not-so-great war, and just when people thought things couldn't possibly get worse, the Great Depression kicks down the door like, surprise, time to ruin your life! The Great Depression was a nightmare for most of the world, especially Americans who lost nearly everything they owned, including the last bit of their sanity when they thought stuffing peanut butter into a burnt onion would make a delicious meal for their families. This monstrosity comes from a 1930s cookbook, part of the whole make do with what you got vibe. You know, back when people treated their pantries like a chaotic round of Chopped. Some genius, let's call him Frank, looked at a jar of peanut butter and a bag of onions and went, I love onions, and I love peanut butter. Let's put them together and pretend I don't deserve the death penalty for committing a crime against humanity. The poor souls unlucky enough to try it describe the experience as chewing into a lukewarm, wet sock, or something eerily similar to whatever your mom cooks for you every night. Now, don't get me wrong, I love onions, and I love a good PB&J sandwich. But, much like your parents' marriage, some things just aren't meant to be together. But while Frank was out here committing culinary crimes with onions and peanut butter, the French were busy stuffing birds inside birds for fun. Rôti sans pareil. As the name suggests, this monstrosity belongs to the French, proving once again that nothing good ever comes out of France. The rôti sans pareil, or a roast without equal, is essentially just a lot of birds stuffed into each other. 17, to be exact. To prepare said monstrosity, a chef would start by cutting a turkey open and stuffing it with a goose, followed by a pheasant, followed by a partridge, followed by a quail, followed by a woodcock, and that's just the start. There's a plover, mallard, cockerel, bustard, snipe, and several other birds all stacked inside each other. In short, over 17 living, breathing animals had to lose their lives to make this dish that was mediocre at best. Now, if you're thinking, why would anyone torture themselves like that? Well, because why not? It was a display of wealth, power, and sheer boredom. If you could afford a rôti sans pareil, you could afford the time to cook a whole farm of birds. But if you think that's a chaotic meal, wait till you hear about the kind of food Depression-era drifters were cooking up when they couldn't even afford a single bird. Mulligan Stew, also known as the original whatever's in the fridge meal, except replace fridge with 1930s hobo camp and replace whatever's in with absolutely anything edible. Mulligan Stew was the dish choice of Depression-era drifters, aka the guys who looked at a dirty boot and thought, yeah, that could use a little seasoning. The recipe? Oh, it's real complicated. Step 1, find a big pie. Step 2, find some water. Step 3, this is the hard one. Throw anything and everything into that pie. Roadkill, expired canned goods, probably a boot or two if it's tender enough. Hell, if you're feeling fancy, throw in a rat. Who's gonna stop you? But the real secret ingredient was a bit of Bull Durham tobacco and everyone's favorite flavor enhancer, lint. And just like that, you've got yourself a steaming hot bowl of if it's brown, it's A-OK. Now, speaking of Depression-era culinary crimes, let's talk about a dish that proves some foods should stay trapped in the past. Gelatin Salad. Now, if you're an average British person, this gelatin-based abomination probably looks like the pinnacle of fine dining. But for the rest of the world with functional taste buds, gelatin salads are where hope, dignity, and sanity go to die. See, during the Great Depression, gelatin was cheap, colorful, and technically edible, which made it the perfect way to trap whatever sad excuse for food you had lying around in a wiggly, translucent prison. What goes in a gelatin salad, I hear you ask? Oh, anything. Carrots, sure. Ham, why not? Canned tuna? Go for it. Nothing screams bon appetit like biting into a slimy chunk of fish suspended in lime jello. And if that wasn't bad enough, some madman thought it'd be cute to decorate these horrors with mayo and olives, because clearly the goal was to punish your taste buds for existing. Honestly, gelatin salads are less salad and more edible evidence of a crime scene. If you ever see one at a party, don't bother eating it, just hand it over to the FBI as Exhibit A. Lampre Pie. Now, for those lucky enough to be unfamiliar with lampreys, they're eel-like creatures with no jaws, rows of circular teeth, and a face straight out of a Lovecraftian horror. You'd think people would look at this aquatic vacuum cleaner and say, absolutely not. But no, rich medieval folks took one look and thought, put it in a crust. Lampreys were boiled, seasoned, and stuffed into a crust, creating a pie so oily and slimy it could double as a weapon in a food fight. But this wasn't just food, it was a status symbol. Eating lamprey pie meant you were rich enough to afford something disgusting. King Henry I famously loved it so much that he supposedly ate himself to death on the stuff, which feels like karma, if you ask me. Today, lamprey pie is mostly extinct, much like the appetite of anyone who's ever heard about it. But if you're ever in the mood to feel superior to medieval royalty, just remember, at least you're not eating prehistoric dental floss baked into a crust.